Hey, good morning, everybody. Come on in, have a seat. How's everybody doing today? Come on in, finish your conversations. You've had the same conversation 100 times over. I'm sure it'll be fine. Come on in. Everybody come on in. Everyone's welcome. Come as you are. Good morning. Welcome to CRS 2024. We've got a really exciting presentation. We want to thank the CRS Research Committee and all the members of that of working through this and working on a study that is going to be really, really rich in information and data for you to take home about your personalities and doing great personality radio. It still does matter. And there's so much great stuff. We worked with the company Smith Geiger this year, their first year working with us. They've been an incredible, incredible partner. I cannot wait for you to meet Andrew and to see the information that he's going to present today. I will remind you that this is not the only time you'll see this data. There will be CRS 360s coming up in future months. There is so much information and so much data in the research that we have done that we can cut it and dissect it about 30 different ways. So we will be definitely scheduling CRS 360s in the future to cover more of this information. Also, I'll remind you that you're here because you're registered for CRS. Probably by Monday, this entire presentation will be up on the CRS website. So if you're, feel free to scribble notes, but you don't have to take everything because the presentation will be up, and it'll be good for you to download that, share with others who aren't here, take this back to your companies. I know that some of you, had to justify why you had to pay and come to CRS, so you can take this back to your bosses and others and say, this is why I go to CRS. Go home with actionable materials that can really impact your ratings and impact your company. So make sure you do that. I work for Big Machine, but I will give UMG a plug. They got a great luncheon set up for today. It's always a highlight of CRS, so make sure you get over to the Ryman for that. I know they've got an incredible lineup of talent, so make sure you do all that. We will have a question and answer session at the end of this. I know that there's a thing with Lainey Wilson right after this, so I know everybody's just going to stay all the way to the end, so just make sure you stay around. But there will be a chance to ask Andrew some questions about the data and things you see on the screen. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Andrew Finlayson from Smith Geiger.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. Thank you all for being here, and I mean it when I say thank you for being here, because I arrived yesterday during your happy hour, and I get to go to a lot of conferences and conventions, and I have to say, you guys really put the happy in happy hour. So I appreciate anybody showing up for a session before noon after a big night like that. So seriously, though, it is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you here today. A pleasure because we got to work closely with the CRS team on coming up with some really important questions. And they're questions that I think are core to the future of country music radio on any platform. So as he just said, you're going to be able to take this data and go back and talk with your team about some fundamental issues that could ensure the future of your business going forward. It's going to help you grow your reach, your reputation, your ratings, your relevancy, and I believe ultimately, if you act on this research, it will influence your overall revenue. So how's that for an ROI? That's a pretty good one for 45 minutes of your life. And it's a privilege because I know the importance of the people in this room. This is CRS, after all. So I know that the leaders of the most powerful format in radio are sitting in this room right now. And you have a national reach, and you have a national responsibility. You're the guardians of the past of country music, and you're the leaders that are going to take us into the future of country music. And I was thinking about that when I was driving back from Huntsville, Alabama. I live in a little town south of Nashville, Franklin. It's not little anymore, but I always think of it that way because I moved here many years ago. And there's that long stretch on 65 that's pretty dull, to be frank. And it's late at night, my wife's fallen asleep, and I was listening to WSM radio. It was like having a friend in the car with me. I was being entertained, but I was also being educated. I was being taken back through the history of country music, which, if you know anything about this station, they're about to celebrate their 100th year of being on the air. Isn't that incredible? It's not just the power of their signal, which is 50,000 watts, and just so you know, I started in radio at a 50,000 watt boomer on the West Coast. It's the power of their personalities and the connection that they've made. And that's true for all the great country radio stations that are around this great nation of ours. So what are you going to get out of this presentation today? Well, you're going to get fresh information. There are questions that were asked that I don't know were ever asked before. And we do a lot of talent research at Smith Geiger. If you don't know our company, we work for all the big boys, and we do a lot of research around the names and people that you watch on air and hear every single day. And so we've got, I think, some very urgent and useful information that you'll be able to take home. But I'm going to try and interpret it for you. I always say information is out there everywhere, but taking it and turning it into insights that you can bring to your team and say, let's talk about this, that's pretty powerful stuff. And so at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you 3 things that I want you to go back and talk to your on-air talent about. And if you're an on-air talent, and I used to be on-air, this is going to help you become better. All great talent know they can become better, and this is going to help them. And for your talent that's a little lost and confused, this will give them very clear directions, 3 things that we want them to do. And so ultimately, if I do my job, you're going to be inspired. You're going to be inspired by what you can do with your station and the connection you can make with your audiences today. Because radio is powered by personalities. We had that question going in, by the way. Do personalities still matter? The answer is very much yes. And we're going to tell you why and how it really matters. So why did we do this study? Well, I always tell people, you don't need to do research if nothing is changing. Is the radio industry changing? Is all media changing? Yes. Is the world changing? I just heard some of the session before this about AI. AI will change everything about everything. I just want you to know there will be no content going forward that isn't somehow touched or shaped by AI at some level. So there's a lot of change going on. And we have clients that used to do surveys every year. They can't wait that long anymore. They've got to do it every 6 months or every quarter. Or for some of the big streamers that we work for, it's every month now that they need to be asking questions about the audience. So how did we do this study? Well, we went out and talked to your listeners. We have a very robust sample here. There's a lot of national studies that you see quoted in the media that have far less people involved in this survey. And you had to be a country music listener to get into this study. In other words, you had to have some interest in what we do for a living. You didn't have to necessarily listen to radio, although we had an enforced quota, as we call it, to make sure we talked to plenty of terrestrial radio listeners in this study. But the bottom line is it's all balanced by census data. We made sure to reflect your audience, the listeners that you're currently reaching and the ones that you could reach. And we did it, of course, as a national study, and this is reflective, again, of the census data, so you can trust this data to reflect, again, your stations, your markets, your listeners. And I think this really reflects your future. If you look at this data closely, it's going to give you some very clear directions about what can you do tomorrow to make your business a better one going forward. So you're going to hear the word streaming a lot in this study. I know, because I looked at some of the past presentations at CRS, that you've covered that topic in great detail. We're going to touch on it. But what I want you to know that in a world of on-demand, and that's where we're headed with streaming, I can get whatever I want whenever I want. I can summon up from Alexa whatever song I want to listen. That you and what you do is very much still in demand. That live radio really matters, and it's because of the power of personalities. So with that in mind, we ask people a very simple question. How are you listening to country music? And so I've already foreshadowed the #1 response, streaming. Streaming is a reality. It's not going away. But I would argue that country radio is being infused into streaming. And I know many of you have streaming apps, and sometimes you have more than one streaming capability as you go forward. That's essential because, again, it's how much of the world experiences content. And I will offer that it puts radio in places it couldn't be before. I listen to radio in my office because I have the ability to stream it there, something I didn't have before streaming was easily available. I used to have a CD player in my office. Terrestrial radio, though, look at the enduring strength of terrestrial radio. And I'm going to give you, again, 3 reasons why people still love radio. YouTube, and in full disclosure, we do work for YouTube, but the bottom line here is that YouTube is a powerful way for people to experience any type of content. And just so you know, it's the second most powerful search engine in the world. So for some people, that's their only search engine, and it's how they're searching for country music. So every radio station, and I argue every media company, has to have a YouTube strategy if they're going to connect with and recruit audiences to their other platforms. Social media, it's baked into everything these days, so it wouldn't surprise me that it showed up here as a way to listen to country music. And for those of you who have younger people in your life, you know the power of TikTok as a music discovery engine and a way for people to experience content. Owned media, that's CDs and LPs. And I have a big wall of them, and my wife's asked me, when will I get rid of them? And I said, never, because I put way too much money into that stuff. I started buying CDs in 1982 when they first became available, so that was a big expense when I was in college. But the bottom line is there are still people who love that pure sort of country music experience of listening to their LPs or their CDs. And I still have a CD player in my car, and I can tell you it's a great way to listen. And then satellite radio, again, is a way that you can reach people all across this country. So we wanted to then ask, why do you listen to radio? You shouldn't assume anything. That's the purpose of research, is to challenge your assumptions, to be able to say with clarity and with clear information, this is why people use us. So we did it as an open-ended question. That meant that we gave them the chance to respond. They typed in and gave us their answers. And they took time to give us answers, and we read all of their answers. We had a team that spent hours and hours digesting all of these, and they categorized them. That's their expertise. And what they did was they categorized them in this way. Convenience, okay? So that's one big bucket. That's a way for people to think about what you do for them. Convenience is an incredible value proposition. Even in a world of on-demand, you are easier than streaming. How are you easier? I don't have to tell it anything. I don't have to type anything. I don't have to launch anything. I just have to turn you on. And that's a way that we, again, help the audience in a world where there's so many choices and so much confusion that we can give people a way to just relax and listen. I can listen whenever I want. It's easy. I say radio is a big, easy button. And you need to take advantage of that. Even in this world, again, where they've got lots of screens, you're a great way for them to experience music. The next one is connection. So when we looked at all these open-ended, we saw a theme coming out of this, that great radio stations connect people with different things. And when you sit down with your talent, you need to emphasize that. You are a connector. That's a new job title you can give them. Connect them to new music. Connect them to the community of country music fans. Connect them with our radio station. Connect them with our clients. Because it makes me feel more as one, as a community. It gets me more involved in the song. That's something you can't get from an algorithm. I love it because it feels like they're talking to me. It offers more than just music. It's being part of a larger community, and that connection is important to me. And if you've ever been to CMA Fest, you know there's an incredible country music community. And then there's sub-communities inside of that. If you ever want to explore some of these, go to Reddit. It's got amazing sub-communities around this topic. So with that, we then saw another theme, conversation. You can't have a conversation really yet with AI. You can have versions of it, but when you're listening to a DJ who really understands the music, you're not alone. You've got a friend. I enjoy their entertainment. The DJ provides an inside look into the song or singer. It's not just about the music, it's about the information and entertainment they bring, making the listening experience more enjoyable. That's great personalities. They know that their job is to give you a little bit of information, but also entertain you at the same time. And they walk that line. And that's something I want you to be able to take back. That shows up later in this research, by the way, that role that we play. So remember, we asked people if they were country music listeners. That's how you got in. 74% recall hearing on-air voices at least occasionally when listening to country music. So there's a quarter that just don't recall. I'm not saying they don't ever hear country radio station personalities, but they are probably leaning into a streaming experience, or maybe they just use CDs, and they just don't identify or connect with some of the personalities. Can I offer that's a great opportunity for the people in this room? If you're a personality, you're also a marketer. You're a marketer of your personality in your station and country music. So there's some room for us to grow that connection. But a third say often or all the time. In other words, that's a big part of the experience for them. And anytime you've got a third of anybody doing something, that's a really important opportunity for you to go forward. So we want to break it down for you. Men a little bit more than women. We didn't ask why, but we know that. Gen Zs, Millennials, Gen Xers, they're all within each range of each other. The Gen Zs are a little less, and I'm going to offer that maybe that's because they spend more time streaming. So that might be a factor there. White, African Americans, a little bit more of an opportunity to connect with those African Americans through this idea that they hear the voices a little bit more. And Latinos, we've got work to do there. It's a big and growing part of the population. I want you to think about if you've got Latinos in your audience, maybe you haven't connected with them. Maybe they don't hear the voices in the same way that you would like them to. So if you want to grow your business with those people, we've got some work to do. Now, what about the impact of personalities? What's the most important impact? Does it make people want to listen more, right? We wouldn't do it if it didn't help grow our ratings, grow our revenue as we go forward. So 76% listen to country music at least as much time when there's an on-air personality. What that means is that there's a big chunk of people who will listen and listen either the same amount or more when there's a personality involved. So again, a little bit more for men. Gen Xers, it wouldn't surprise me that they were above the others because they've grown up with some of these personalities. They've built a relationship with some of the people that are on at your stations. Then there's white, African Americans, and look at the opportunity here with Latinos. When they do hear personalities, they're more inclined to listen more. So again, there's a growth opportunity for everybody in this room to speak to that audience. But this is the big one. A third will listen for more time when there's an on-air personality. This will make your on-air personalities feel good. There's a big chunk of the audience that says, yes, when I hear a voice, when I hear a good on-air personality, I want to spend more time with them, which means more time listening to your radio station. Now, what do we need to do to make sure that we appeal to those people and that they consistently come back? Because we're a business of time and habit. We want to make sure that we know what they need. So I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But again, a little bit more with men, a little bit more with Gen Zers, African Americans, and just so you know, Latinos were just the same as the general population, around 32%. So again, you've got some growth opportunities with different segments of your audience to lean in a little bit more to the fact that you have compelling on-air personalities. Now, I haven't said this word as often as I probably should have at the beginning of this presentation, but I'm going to say it a lot from this point forward. You heard it in the previous conversation, by the way, if you were in the room for that conversation about AI, the word authentic. What does the word authentic mean? Well, we've got some definitions for you because, again, when we work with on-air talent, and I've coached and consulted hundreds of them over the years, you want them to be authentic, which means you want them to be themselves, which means that they can show a little bit of who they are. I always say there are things that get you up in the morning. Those things, if they show up on the air, make you authentic. But we need to pick the right things to be able to connect with the audience today. So we ask the question, what do you want most from on-air talent? These are from people that at least hear voices some of the time. So they're people that know that there are on-air personalities out there. So what do they want? This is what we call a forced choice question. I'm sort of a research geek, but I'll explain it this way. We give people two choices. They cannot pick both. They have to pick one or the other. And the answers that we're giving them are not always polar opposites, but they're of the same theme. So we're forcing them to make a choice. And you can see clearly that they have leaned towards personalities who feel authentic even if they're not always polished. So I'm going to pause there. How many of you are on-air personalities or have been? Okay, we got a lot of you in the room. That's great. Good. When you're authentic, you don't have to be perfect. When you're authentic, you don't have to worry about making a mistake. And I'm just going to offer to you that if you've been on social media lately, if you've seen the biggest influencers, some of them have perfectly curated lives, but the most successful influencers are themselves. They're real. And that's something that the audience craves. In a world of algorithms and in a world that's going to be filled with AI content, this is our opportunity. This is our chance to connect with the audience. And again, I worked in radio, KCBS News Time, 7:45. We were all taught to speak in a certain way. That's not the way you should speak today. I always say, if you've got a booth voice, you're not authentic, right? You got to be the person you are when you're on the air. With that in mind, here's another forced choice. Personalities who are no nonsense, just introducing songs without much fanfare. I got 3 seconds to introduce this next song. Or personalities who share stories and talk about the music they're introducing. The audience leans towards that. Stories are powerful. Now, great on-air talent know stories that are powerful are not always long, right? They know that you can tell a story in 4 or 5 seconds sometimes. So the analogy I'd offer here is if you say, coming out of a song, I remember that song when it first came out in 1979, and I was driving my '76 Malibu. That's a story, right? Connects you with the audience. If you go on with that story to say, and it had bench seats, and if you turned the car a certain direction, you could slide the girl next to you, that's way too much information, okay? So great talent self-edit in their heads and know that 3, 4, 5 seconds sometimes can get them where they need to go. And sometimes the story is not about you, it's about the music and the relationship that we all have with the music. So again, great on-air personalities know how to do that self-edit of that. Here's another forced choice. Personalities who put on a show, and let's be honest, we're all in show business to a degree, versus personalities who take a casual, everyman approach. Again, the audience leans towards the casual and everyman. So I do some work with public media. I delivered a big public media project the other day, and I can tell you there's a consistent theme with some of the people who don't listen to public media. They feel like the people on it don't talk to them, don't connect with them. There's a little bit more formality to some public media radio stations. That's something that you guys don't have a problem with, but you need to be careful around that. Again, less polish, more real is what we're hearing from your listeners. Personalities who share my values in politics and talk about it on air. So, as I look at that, I think about how polarized cable news has become. I think this is telling us we need to be the escape from that we don't want to lean into that. I'm sure there's a business there, by the way, but that's not maybe the best business for you if you want to reach most people in your market. And I think some of the people that are listening to radio today are actively seeking an escape from some of the news that's out there right now. We're going to see more about that in just a moment. But we ask about essential elements for on-air talent. Whether or not you're getting them, what would you consider to be essential from the people that you listen to on the radio? Is a real person, not a bot. So this foreshadows the AI research that we're going to have coming up here. But what does that mean, real? Well, again, it's somebody you feel that connection with. I talk with talent a lot, and I have to be careful not to hit my microphone, but I do this. Boom. I say, if you don't have a heartbeat, they're not going to love you. And how can you have a heartbeat when you're talking? Well, you're real. You don't bring your problems to the viewers, by the way. You don't bring your problems to the listeners. You actually bring a positive heartbeat to the audiences that you serve. Number 2 is related to that, is authentic. So anytime I see 2 things in an inventory, that's what we call this, that relate to each other, that really reinforces that idea. So again, authenticity, something the audience is craving right now. Makes me feel good, has a positive outlook. That's pretty high up on this list. I want you to jump down to keeps a light mood. So there's 2 items that reinforce each other. That's an important thing for your talent to know. I always tell on-air talent, you can never have a bad day. I don't care if the car broke down on the way to work. I don't care if you had a fight with your husband right before you left to go to the station. You can never have a bad day on air. And the analogy I always offer is that I went to a John Denver concert. I used to go to a lot of John Denver concerts in general. And it was when he was having a rough time in his life. And he got up on stage and he said, I'm having a really rough time. And you could just feel 2,000 people at the same time lose their will to live. He did an okay concert, but it wasn't a great concert because he wasn't having a great day. Well, guess what? We can't do that on air. And the audience is asking us actually to be the opposite, to give them a lift up rather than push them down. Now, the next one there introduces me to new country music and is smart about country music, the one right below it there. Now, I know how tight playlists are. And I know we have to be thoughtful about introducing new music. But this shows the role that we play in discovery. I always say great on-air talent have sort of a little serendipity in their head, meaning they'll come up with something you've never thought about or experienced before. That's what you like about your friends, by the way. So a great on-air personality says, hey, I've got a new song for you, and here's why I want you to hear it. So they introduce you to new music. They give you more to know about that music. And is smart about country music? Notice it says smart about country music, not smart, meaning that you don't act smart. You instead make sure that people know that you know about the music and the history of country music. Has a unique personality. So again, when I sit down with talent and I'm coaching them, I say, tell me your 5 passions, the 5 things that make you a person. And they'll say, oh, I love to cook. Great. How do we work that into the on-air? I like to take hikes. I talked with an anchor once who made $6 million a year. And he had nothing in common with the rest of us. He collected Ferraris, just so you know. When I asked him what he did for his passions, I collect Ferraris. I said, that's not going to help me. But he said, I do like to hike. And I said, we're golden. So we talked about how he could bring that to the real world. You have those passions. Maybe it's something else that you really animate your life with, but those things can show up on the air and make you unique. And then provides interesting information about the music they're playing. So now we've got 3 that relate to the role of educating the audience about the music that they're listening to. That's something, again, the algorithm can't do. That's something you do because you went to that concert. You remember when that song came out. You were at the award show. You've got education that you can pass along to people there. So with that in mind, we need to look at the bottom of the list. So now we've looked at the top, most essential. What are the least essential elements? This is not to say you don't do these things. They're just lower on the list. So cares about the things I care about. Yeah, that's nice, but not necessary. In other words, we don't have to pretend to be everybody in the audience is patriotic. There are days when we will be patriotic. There are reasons to love this country, but that's not the reason I listen to you. You don't have to force it on me, in other words. Be local to my area. I am sure a lot of you went straight to that one and you're worried. I'm going to pause you there because I've got reasons why local still matters. But what this is telling us is that great personalities work anywhere. Great personalities can work coast to coast. They can work regionally. So again, being local is not enough, in other words, to succeed with your audience. There are some things you could do local that help you, but just being local is not going to solve the problem of connecting with the audience these days. Has politics that match mine? I'll be honest, I thought that might be higher because I do a lot of news research. But this tells you that, again, the audience is looking for an escape from some of that stuff, not jumping right into the pond of whatever the latest controversy is. So what about being local? We wanted to ask because many of you are local. You are providing a local value proposition, if you want to think of it that way. By the way, I always think of advertisers as part of that local value proposition because I can find out about businesses and services that I really need. So with that in mind, what kind of news do you want to hear from on-air talent? Very broad question. We swim in an ocean of news, but what do you really want from the on-air radio personalities at your local country radio station? Well, guess what? They want news about country music. Now, how many times have you heard that? They really want you to be their connection to country music and to the music that they love. Information about the music or artist being played. Really understanding that artist that I just heard and giving me that little nugget. What you do as on-air personalities is often give me that thing I can talk to my wife about or talk to my coworker about when I get to work. You make me smarter while I'm driving and being entertained. Breaking news from your area, general weather from your area, alerts of any approaching severe weather. Those are what we call utilities. Those are unique local value propositions. Now you can say, well, we voice track, or now we're going to start using AI for some of our day parts. I'm just going to offer that AI can be a solution to that problem if you want to provide alerts, because there are capabilities that are now being generated by big companies to basically automate some of those things. So your on-air could have alerts even if nobody's in the building. Separate discussion, but I just want you to know it's possible. Information about concert tours and local shows, information about local events. I see this showing up, by the way, in a lot of our research, that they see local media as their friend who knows what's going on. And if you can provide that, hey, did you know there's a food festival coming up? That's of value, particularly to younger people who have time to go out and do some of these things and want to experience their area. There's a lot with the area of experience versus buying things right now. News about emergencies happening in your area, that relates to those other ones above. Traffic information for your specific area, that's been dropping. I've seen it in all our research, and that's because of Waze. It doesn't mean you don't do traffic information. It just means that it's not as critical as it once was. Local sports, regional, national, international, political news, guys, they can get that from you, but they can get it from so many other places right now. I just wouldn't lean into it, is what I'm saying. Don't necessarily cancel your contract with CBS News. Please don't. My wife used to work there, still gets a pension. But the bottom line is you want to have a plan for your on-air talent to satisfy these top things if you're going to be local and really, again, prove the value of being local. So you've heard me use the word escapism, get away from the news. That escape factor is a big part of what you guys can do for the audience going forward. If you sit down at the end of the day and say, I help my audience escape all the worries and fears that they have in a complex and sometimes scary world, you'll have done your job. I would put a big sign before you enter the booth that says, help the audience escape their worries, because that's what you can do with country music. So 90% of those who say they hear on-air personalities at least sometimes say it is important for radio personalities to keep a light mood. Underscore, but underscore it with this. 47% say it's essential. Essential. If somebody says it's essential, and you go into the booth and you say, well, today I'm not going to be light, you better have a pretty darn good reason. And if you do an entire show and you've bummed out the audience, you've just done the opposite of what half of the audience is asking you to do. Your job description now says, I help people have a lighter mood. I take away some of their worries. I don't add to their burdens as we go forward. So let's talk about talent. We got clips from a whole bunch of you, 12 clips from different people, different parts of the country. We're not going to play them. I urged against that. I listened to all of them. There's some really high quality stuff that we were able to offer to these people that were taking this survey. But if I played a clip, you'd listen to it and you'd be thinking all about the tone and the timing and the topics and how their voice sounded, and you wouldn't be hearing what I'm trying to say, which is that we aggregated all of this. We took these 12 clips, and what we did was we coded them. We have a team that does this. They're specialists in this. And they listen to all these clips, and they have this system in place. So we came up with these different categories that the different content fit into. So some of it was team versus solo. That's easy. 2, 3 people in a booth versus just one person. Then there was jokey versus not. In other words, was somebody trying to laugh? Was there laughter involved in this clip, or was there no laughter, no humor really attached to what we were experiencing? Music focused, leaning into that music, descriptions of the songs, information about the artist, versus being more generic about, hey, this is what's going on right now. Sports and pop culture versus not. There are DJs that lean into the viral. I know there are a lot of prep services that give you the thing that everybody's talking about, versus maybe being more focused on the music and events and other things. So that was a way we broke it apart. The last one was the trickiest one, informational versus not. It was this idea that some people really leaned into sort of passing along information, and then some people were a little bit lighter in their approach to what they were telling people. I wouldn't say it was information-free, but it was leaning away from sort of being more fact-oriented. And so the respondents listened to all 12 clips. This is all 816 of them. And then they assessed each one, and we had a series of questions that we asked. And we do all the processing, we do all the analysis behind the scene, the machine's grinding away, and our people came back with this. What would have definitively kept people listening? So I've already told you some of these, but this backs up what I've just told you. So in other words, we asked them these questions, but now we made them listen to a bunch of clips, and we wanted to see if it was really true. And there are 2 things that are really true that they proved to us. So just so you know, team versus solo, a little edge to team, and I think I know why. I do work with big sports shows and other things, and if you have a solo person there's nobody to react to you. When you have two people in the booth, you can have one person say something and the other person reacts. And that's really important for that action-reaction if you're trying to do funny. So I used to work for Jimmy Kimmel as a digital and social consultant, and you notice that Jimmy Kimmel always has somebody that reacts to him. He's funny, but he's funnier when somebody reacts to him. And it's that playing off of each other that really makes teams work well. With that in mind, jokey versus earnest. So again, we were looking for those moments of laughter and trying to be funny, and those perform better in the analysis of your audience, those 816 people that we talked to. Music-focused, those who gave me information and value around the music, around the artists, around the songs that I was just listening to, about the concerts just coming up, got an edge over those who stayed a little bit more generic, were more, again, about what's going on in the world. Sports, pop culture focused, again, sort of that viral, here's what everybody's talking about, did you see that show last night kind of thing, versus, again, maybe being more true to the music and to the experience that I'm having right now. This doesn't mean you can't talk about pop culture, and if your team just won the Super Bowl, please, go for it. But you need to know that the audience, again, gets that pop culture and sports scores from other places. And then there's this, informational versus not informational. These are very close. But it's telling you that the lighter mood really does help the audience. They're there to learn things, but they're really there to be entertained. So the two that I want you to walk away from after all this analysis is that lighter approach, that sense of a little bit of humor injected into it, and really being about the music can pay off enormously. It doesn't mean dump your prep service. It just means, though, be judicious in what you bring into the show. You've really got to be about the experience that country music provides you, and you've got to do it with a lighter tone if you want to succeed in today's environment. So, I promised AI. We do a lot of work in AI. I'm going to be presenting at NAB twice on AI and its implications for content creators like you. Huge, huge implications for sales, just so you guys know. Changes everything about the sales process, from how do you prospect, how do you create the copy, even creating on-air testimonials can now be done with AI as a voice cloning experience. But we wanted to ask your audience how they felt about it. So with that in mind, we said, how do you feel about the use of AI voices? The exact phrasing of the question was something along the lines, some radio and streaming music experiences are now using AI-powered personalities. What do you think? Well, they feel more than they think, but they think that 25% of them hate the idea. Now, I think that's a broader response to all the changes that AI is bringing into the world. Again, I get to see all our research. I know a huge portion of the audience is very, very concerned about the impact that AI is going to have on society. They're very concerned that they may lose their job to AI. So this is colored by all the things they're hearing about AI. So they may never have heard an AI voice. They may not know they've ever heard an AI voice, but they are not big fans of this. 22% don't like it very much. So you've got an uphill battle if you're going to do this. I'm not saying don't do it, because I actually teach people how to use AI responsibly, but you've got to be very, very thoughtful about how you do it. 12%, they're the early adopters. I'm all in for it. Let's try something new. 20% like it somewhat. 20% not sure. They're on the fence. They haven't seen it, heard it. They don't know enough to make an evaluation. But you got half in this sample basically leaning towards the, I don't like this feels weird, I'm not sure I'm going to be a big fan of it. So when you do it, you've got to think about how you do it. There was a discussion in the last presentation about transparency. Turns out that's a double-edged sword. You can tell people you're using AI, and that seems like you're being honest, but it also introduces some fear and doubt into your content. So how often you disclose and the way you disclose actually turns out to be very important if you're going to use AI for any capability. But I just want to remind you, you all use AI. I was at a conference at Stanford, and I'm not name-dropping that. It's just because there was a professor there who was one of the founding fathers of AI. And somebody asked him, should I tell people that I'm using AI to produce my content? And he said, did you do it today? And the person said, why? Well, if you used email, you used AI, because spell check and Grammarly, they're AIs. In other words, we haven't been disclosing that. and it's part of a world that we live in. So again, AI is going to be infused into everything, but there are certain applications where I think you do owe the audience an explanation, what I call why did we use AI versus how did we use AI. With that in mind, let's bring it all home. Given you a lot of information. I hope I've given you some valuable insights, but I want to give you some inspiration as we wrap this up. So with that in mind, I want you to take this data and take it to your teams. I want you to make this data dance. I've tried to make it dance for you. I want you to make it dance for your team. You can own this data. CRS did it for you. It's now yours to take and discuss with your team. And it's going to create a rich discussion. I know because we had a lot of really great discussions with the CRS leadership as we got this data in. They were very, very thoughtful about what you needed to know. Just so you know, there's a lot more data than what I presented today. This is the highlights. There's ways to segment this out in different ways. But the bottom line here is I want you to take it and meet with your leadership. Unless you're the boss, you've got a boss. And this is something you can say. We were talking about how you can justify coming to CRS. Well, this is a great gift to give your corporate leadership. I saw this. I learned this. I want to apply this to some of the challenges that we're facing as a radio station heading into 2024-25. So take it to the boss and say, I can help us use this information. Then I'd love for you to use this to help evaluate your talent. Evaluate yourself, evaluate your colleagues, because there's some very clear things you need to do more of and some things that you need to do less of. And then I believe this can be very powerful to help grow talent. Again, I coach talent, and I know that the best talent always know they can be better. And I could give you the names of people I've coached just with their first name, and you would know them. And the one thing I know about those people is they're hungry for information to help them become even better. They know who they are. They wouldn't be where they are if they didn't have an authentic sense of themselves, but they know they can become better because the world's changing around them. And what worked 10 years ago may not work today. So with that, I'm going to give you 3 talking points. If I were to sit down with you and say, look at all this data, there are 3 things, though, that we need to work on. 3 opportunities that we can commit to. I'll help you if you are willing to try some of these ideas. So the first is authenticity. How can we make sure that you connect with the audience that's hungry for authentic talent and authentic content in this day and age? And I would argue country music has the best authenticity just because of the source content of music that you use. So emphasize that idea of being real versus polished. Again, if they change their voice, if they change their attitude when they go into the booth, they may not be as authentic as the audience needs. But I want you to be authentic in a positive way because you need to emphasize that people use country music to escape all the rest of the world. That even though country music will talk about a broken down pickup truck, it's really a larger escape from some of the realities that we all face, the problems that we're all dealing with. So be positive and help lighten the mood of the audience. That when they finish listening to you, when they get to the driveway and they have to get into the house, you've lifted them up on the way home as opposed to push burdens on them and press down on them. So that's something that we can all be better at. And I'm going to give you a tool, by the way. I should stop there. I do what I call hope, heroes, and helpers. So I work with a lot of news organizations, network, local TV stations, etc. And I always say, look, you got to deliver the bad news, but you got to deliver it with hope, heroes, and helpers. Hope that there's something good in this story. Heroes, somebody did the right thing in this story. And helpers, somebody's helping those who were hurt in this story. Well, you don't have to do all 3 of those, but you can find those in your community if you do need it. And then music. You've heard it throughout this presentation. People listen to country music, radio stations for country music. But they want an extra layer to it. They want to have that friend who helps them feel smarter about the country music that they're listening to. That gives them that little bit of information about the song or the artist that they just heard, that they're going to hear. And so I'll just offer an example. I get into rental cars. I travel a lot to do these types of presentations. The first thing I do is I always turn on local radio. I love radio. I like to listen to local radio. And I was listening to a radio station in another state. It was Sunday, because I had to be presenting on Monday morning. And they were doing the teaser, the promo for Monday morning. Their morning show was going to be on Monday with 3 things, and all 3 of them were negatives. One of them was how to deal with a difficult boss. Really? You're going to promote that on Friday all weekend long, that you're going to help me with a difficult boss. A, I don't want to think about my boss. And you're not really going to solve that problem for me. It was a negative. The other two were not positives either. But the point is, they spent all weekend telling me the wrong thing. And I bet you if they did a back sell, hey, this was our week in our great morning show, they probably had 3 or 4 negatives that they were leaning into. Don't do that. You got to promote what you want to be and then live up to that promise with the audience that you serve. So you've gotten a lot of information. You've gotten hopefully some insights. I hope you feel inspired about one thing. Radio, country radio, has the power of authenticity in a world of algorithms and AI. And that's what's going to keep you guys going. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you take this data and use it and make it dance for your teams as well. We welcome any questions that you have. So thank you again for this opportunity.
So if you would like to ask a question, I'm sure we'll put that phone number. There it is. That's nice. Text that phone number. That'll come right here, and we'll try to ask as many as possible. Question number 1, was there any research done in regards to encouraging listener phone calls and or playing back listener audio on the air, whether it be in response to a topic on the air or something as simple as a winner playback for a contest?
Yeah, we did not ask that question. It's a great one, because I know that's a part of many morning shows, is to show your connection with the audience and bring them into the show. And let's be honest, real people are more interesting and exciting and say things that we don't say. A lot of this, of course, is recorded well in advance. I think what the caution is that if you're going to use it, let's keep it in a positive tone. You know, again, let's not go into darker areas or frustrations or concerns. Let's stay away from the broken car and the problems that it caused me. And instead, let's try to be the hope, the heroes, and the helpers for our audience. How can we help them today? How can we be our own little hero when we're working with the audience? And of course, hope is something that we can give people in a lot of different ways. So we did not ask that question, but I think there are ways to be positive when we bring it into the show.
We have a lot of great questions coming in. Thankfully, we have some time. Next question was, is there a way to get a full document of all your research?
Documents of our past research?
I think this research.
This research, oh yeah. So this research is going to be available at the end of this conference. This presentation is actually going to be posted as well, so you'll be able to watch it again if you really, really want to see it again. But you're going to be able to get the deck. And then again, there's deeper research, because this is the highlights that the CRS team has, and they're going to be doing some additional follow-up sessions as a result of this, because there's a lot of richness, there's a lot of layers, a lot of segmentation, as we like to say, that can be done out of this research.
Again, lots of questions coming in. Feel free to text that number on the screen. Is there any data about live versus syndicated mornings or other day parts?
Yeah, so again, live versus syndicated, I think there's a value in live, because in a world of on-demand, live is different for that very reason. And I think it can play to some of the things that we identified in this research of being authentic and real. If you're in the moment with me, that could have a value. I'm not saying that pre-tapes, syndicated content from another market, time-shifted, can't work, but we see it in our national work with morning shows. You know, it's best when it's live on the East Coast. When it's 2 hours delayed on the West Coast, you can feel it, you can see it. So again, I don't have the answer out of this research, but there's clear indications you can be authentic and real by being live.
One thing that you mentioned was keeping a light mood and being positive on air. If you're having a bad day, how do you keep that light mood but also not fake happiness, since you want to remain real and authentic?
Yeah, so I have this conversation all the time because we all have bad days, right? I mean, we're human beings, we got problems. None of us make as much money as we'd like, and frankly, sometimes life just deals us a bad set of cards. But what you have to do is you have to have a mechanism to get yourself in the better frame of mind. So one of the best ones I know is a co-host, somebody who can basically lift you up when you're feeling a little bit down. And in some cases, they can actually lean more into doing the show when you're not at your absolute best. And then you do the same in return for them. So that's one of the values of teams, is that we can sort of offset each other when we're not having the best day. If you're not having the best day and you're solo, you've got to make a conscious effort to find things that in your heart are things that make you joyful and happy. Remember I talked about the 5 passions? you know. So I was in Pittsburgh. If you know anything about Pittsburgh, they love pierogies. Okay, you know what pierogi is? So anyway, so it's a little dumpling-like thing. It's a big deal there. And one of the anchors that I was talking to said, I love pierogies. And I said, great, on a bad day, think about the best pierogi your mom ever made you. That can lift you up. It can. Good memories can actually put a smile on your face and make your voice change. And that's why, I don't know, do you guys stand when you booth? When I was working in a rocker, we had to stand. That was the boss's belief we were better when we were standing. The point is that just your physical can actually change your voice. You can change how you feel by changing your attitude physically.
Someone has asked if you could please repeat the 3 things that you focus on when dealing with serious news or situations.
Serious news and information. Okay, got it. So this is a whole set of workshops I do called Hope, Heroes, and Helpers. I'm going to tell you I've done it for 3 network news operations. So you will see it on nightly news and others, and just generally speaking. They, by the way, are smart people, so they've already thought of some of this, but I help to crystallize it. When you've got a terrible story, and what I always say is the Uvalde stories, you know, they're just horrible. There's just nothing you can do but just know that the audience is going to be shaken by this. It's traumatic to hear these stories. In that story, or around that story, you need to find a little bit of hope. There is always a little bit of hope in even the darkest stories. And one of the mechanisms you can use to find that is to identify the heroes, the person who did the right thing. In Uvalde, there was a school teacher who died saving her kids. She's dead, but she's a hero. And that meant something to the audience when they were hearing this terrible story. And then there's helpers, the people who come in and help with the people recovering from this, the people who rush towards the terrible thing as opposed to run away. A lot of first responders qualify as helpers. So I'm a big fan, my father used to be a police officer, of recognizing those first responders as part of what we do in the community, because they do help us. So I could go on for another hour, but those are the 3 things that can sort of be an antidote to all the terrible things that we have to tell the world about.
In which grouping did you put digital radio such as TuneIn? And did your research reveal why the gap between satellite and terrestrial is so broad?
Yeah, so the categories that we had at the beginning were that we had the streaming, and we let people identify what was in that. I think they know, though, what streaming is. Streaming, though, by the way, is a lot of what we experience, even if we don't think of streaming. And I'm going to tell you why. When we sit down, we do a lot of focus groups. We'll say, how do you listen or watch this particular show? They often don't know. They don't even know where it came from. They just type it in or say it to their system, and it pops up. So that's one of the things that, again, we had to just let people assign what they put in different buckets. So streaming was the biggest one. Terrestrial radio, though, they know what that is. They use it, and they love it. And we showed you why they love it as part of this. So I don't know if I got the full answer there, but I think I got close.
That's pretty good. Is there any questions about people following the on-air talent on social media?
I love this question.
And is it important?
Yeah. So if you don't know my title, it used to be EVP of social media, because for many years that was the biggest problem our clients faced. Does social media recruit, and does it retain audiences? So I've done this research so often I don't have to do it anymore. The answer is absolutely yes. If you can build a relationship with people on social media, you can then start to move them to your other platforms. You have to put some effort into it, and the good news is AI will help you with this, by the way. But being present in social media can allow you to connect with audiences that you might otherwise never run into. So it's a very powerful marketing opportunity if it's done well. But again, you've got to strike the right tone. You've got to be authentic, because social media prizes that, and it helps if you're positive on social media. Again, that's what they're looking for from us on air, so we should reflect that. And I'll just give this quick story. I was asked to come in for a big company that owns a lot of stations, and they said, look at our social media and tell us what we're doing right or wrong. And I looked at their social media, and it bore no resemblance to what they were doing in their on-air. They were like 2 different worlds. And I said, we got to make sure that we're doing what we do on air in social media, and it started to work for them. They were true to their brand. Their personalities understood, this is what we are on air, this is what we're also going to be in social media. So that helped them to recruit again and retain audiences. So it does work. It's just a lot of work.
I'm going to ask you just one more question, and then we'll get wrapped
Yeah.
up. If there's some honesty here, if people want positivity, why are phony phone calls so big?
Well, so there's a value of those calls to create surprises for the audience, to create drama, and there is an appetite for drama, there's no question. I've worked on several reality TV shows where they're nothing but manufactured drama. But I think what also people are looking for is that connection to another person. And if you have the same issue or concern, oh, my brother's like that, or my aunt did the same thing the other day, you can feel like it's a friend talking about somebody that you know. So a good friend will tell you things that are sometimes embarrassing about themselves, sometimes revealing maybe too much about themselves, but you feel an emotional connection as a result of that. I think you have to be careful on air, because of course you can TMI it in ways that you don't want to. But those phone calls allow us, in effect, a window into other people's lives. Again, I'm just offering that when you finish those calls, be positive, be supportive, be understanding. Great talent, by the way, is built with a big, what I call empathy bone. They know how to connect with other people's emotional states, and that's what we want to do. I'm just going to finish with this one thought, because this is something that's really important. When we were doing this, we did not research this, but when you come out of a piece of music, you better show you were listening to that piece of music. You better show emotionally that you were listening to that. You can't just all of a sudden show up. And I'll tell this story. I was working for one of the big network news magazines. I was asked to help the talent be better. And I said, what's wrong with this talent? They're coming out of this very emotional story. Just, the audience is sitting there at home crying, and they don't look like they've even seen it. And the producer said, they didn't. We have to pre-tape these things. The story wasn't done. She had to pre-tape. You get where I'm going? They put those two things together, and it made the talent look terrible. So if you're going to pre-tape, and I know we have to, and if you're going to voice clone, and we may be doing that, you got to make sure it reflects the piece of music that you just came out of. Otherwise, you will come off as insincere and inauthentic. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. So I know we got another presentation coming up, so I just want to thank you again. Great questions. And please, be authentic.